podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
I'm tired, Dave, but otherwise fine.
You're tired, and yet on deadline day, you finished work nice and early. A pointer towards the fact that this has been a quiet deadline day. Because I would imagine last year, with Chelsea spending 43 bajillion pounds, there was probably a lot more buzz and stuff going on deadline day last year for you.
Yes, that is true. Today has actually been really busy, but not with deadline day stuff. Deadline day has just been making everything more squashed together because you have to keep an eye on, do little updates on that all the way through, even though there's nothing of real relevance going on. And yet there's loads of other stuff going on, like obviously the matches last night, the matches tonight, the fact that there's a big game at the weekend and the AFCON going on and stuff like that. So I really wish I was finished work, but I'm not finished work, sadly. I'm just home to carry on with some other work.
Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot in the way of transfers. I mean, Arsenal have done nothing. Villa have signed a couple of youngsters. Morgan Rogers deal done today. It looks like Bournemouth are going to get Enes Ünal in. We did talk about how they could use another striker. So that's that. Brentford have signed a couple of youngsters. They've tried to do some bigger deals, but nothing thus far. Brighton have signed Valentin Barco. Burnley are trying to get a couple across the line. Having spent all the money last January, Chelsea have signed nobody this January. Everton aren't bringing anyone in. Crystal Palace have made a couple of signings. I do like the Adam Wharton deal. Nothing thus far for Fulham. Obviously, nothing for us. We'll come back to us in a second. Luton have made a few signings that, you know, are more with a long-term view. City have signed Echeverri from River Plate. Again, that's a long-term one. United have done nothing. Newcastle have done nothing bar sign a young player. Sheffield Wednesday have been busy enough and looks like they're trying to get a couple in before the deadline closes. Spurs signing Timo Werner and Radu Dragusin is notable. West Ham have brought in Calvin Phillips, and Wolves signed Noel Lemina, and they're apparently still trying to work on getting a forward in. It has been a very, very quiet transfer window in stark contrast to last January, which, to be fair, was mostly Chelsea being stupid, and the summer where a lot of teams spent a lot of money. Do you think that's largely down to teams being scared of getting hit with profit and sustainability charges after Everton were deducted 10 points and have been charged again, and Forest have been charged again? Do you think this could also bleed into the summer where we see certain clubs, Aston Villa are one who've been named, who are up against the wall for FFP, maybe having to sell in order to buy? Do you think that could be the case for a few clubs? Or a few of the bigger clubs, I should say.
I do think it might be the case, but I do think that will be largely restricted to the ones who we know have overspent, or been overspending, we should say. Like Chelsea and Newcastle, obviously we know why they can't make any signings at the minute. It's because they made all of them. They made all the signings that were possible and then some more that they didn't need as well. Nottingham Forest, obviously, a pretty good example of that. I think Everton are slightly different, in fairness, in that they just made a load of horrible signings and wasted an incredible amount of money. That's slightly different to, you know, what Newcastle did last year, or Nottingham Forest did after getting promoted, for example. I still do think that this specific window, there's quite a big influence by the fact of, there's a very, very clear group of three teams at the bottom, maybe another one or two just because of poor form or whatever. But by and large, I don't think that there is, a 5, 6, 7 team group at the bottom who are worried about the drop. It's basically Luton have to keep this outperformance going for themselves to stay up, and Burnley and Sheffield United basically need to bring in Jesus as their manager over the second half of the season if they're going to survive. So I do think that a lot of it is down to that there's not the pressure to spend to survive, and maybe that's why teams have just been able to make one decent signing, which might be a bit of cover for half season, and then they rely on them for the next campaign.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny as well, you look at the league table, and oftentimes at this point in the year, there'd probably be 4 or 5 managers who were worried about their jobs as well. And now you look at the table, and I don't see Everton firing Dyche, because the only reason they're in the bottom 3 is because of what took place before Dyche got there, with the incompetence that was just rampant through the club. Without that points deduction, Everton would be sitting very comfortably in 12th. I don't see Luton changing managers. I think even if they were to be dragged back into the relegation zone and stay there, I think they made a very straightforward decision before the year. We're going to build a team to be really good in the Championship next year. We're going to have a go at staying up. But if we don't, we'll go down in a really strong position, and we'll have a full year of Premier League money in our pocket, plus a parachute payment. That'll put us in a great position to come back up and hopefully be stronger. Sheffield United have already changed manager. Nottingham Forest have already changed manager. I don't think there's any world in which Brentford would move on from Thomas Frank. The only 2 you'd look at are Vincent Kompany and Roy Hodgson. And I mean, with Hodgson, I think Palace, because of how they operate, are more likely to just try and grind their way through to the summer and then make a change. With Kompany, he took over, he oversaw an enormous change at the club, both in terms of the personnel and the way they play. He got them promoted at the first attempt. So I do think maybe they'd be willing to let it ride out, go down, and give him another chance to get them up and then keep them up. So it may well be that we don't see another managerial change for the rest of the season. And we've seen, very few this year, only 2 thus far. Paul Heckingbottom fired by Sheffield United, replaced by Chris Wilder, and Steve Cooper fired by Forest, replaced by Nuno. That's unusual even for this point in the season to have had so few. I'm not sure we'll see another one. This might just be a season where teams stick with what they have. And again, like you said, there's not a drastic... I don't think Brentford are overly concerned about relegation because they've got Tony back. They'll get other players back. I think they'll be fine. I think Palace will be fine, and everybody above them just looks very, very comfortable. It is Forest, Luton, Everton, Burnley, and Sheffield United, but the issue for Nottingham Forest and Everton is they can't really afford to spend because they've already been hit with one charge. And for the 3 teams that are... The other 3 teams, 2 of them are newly promoted. Sorry, the 3 of them are newly promoted. 2 of them already look like they're pretty much gone. Sheffield United and Burnley, they don't look like they've got much hope unless Forest and Everton get hit with another points deduction, in which case that will give them a shot, but they're probably not willing to overspend because they want to go down in a strong financial position to have a chance of coming back up next year. So yeah, and that's most likely the cause of the lack of... there's nobody in a Bournemouth position from last season, for example. And then there's nobody in a Chelsea position or a Newcastle position where they've got new owners with very deep pockets and empty heads. Like you said, Newcastle and Chelsea are limited this window and may well be limited in the summer as well. But that's because of ambition more than anything, because they spent to succeed. Nottingham Forest spent to get promoted and then stay in the division. Everton are there because of incompetence, because they've been a founding member of the Premier League. They've been in the Premier League the entire time. They've gotten every penny the Premier League had to pay out. And yet they're still in this situation because they've just wasted money on utter dross. So they've nobody to blame, only themselves. They can cry about corruption and cry about the big six. Nobody made you sign Gylfi Sigurdsson, Davy Klaassen and Wayne Rooney to play, and Nikola Vlasic in one summer to play the same position. No one made you do that. No one made you go and sign Beto and Chermetti when you already had Dominic Calvert-Lewin. They have no excuse, none at all, for where they are. And I did think maybe at the top of the table we'd see some movement. Spurs obviously have made a big move with Dragusin and bringing in Timo Werner. Villa are up against the wall as well because of their ambition and how well, they've how much effort and money they've put into becoming a relevant force in the league. Arsenal have spent, because of how Chelsea have spent, it does often get ignored how much money Arsenal have spent in the last 3 years. 620 million. So I would imagine they're also looking at a situation where it's going to be quite tight for them. They've got 25 million committed to buy David Raya in the summer. I don't know how much else they'll have to do. They might be in a sell to buy situation come summer. So the likes of Fabio Vieira and maybe Emile Smith-Rowe, those players might have to be sold in order for Arteta to bring somebody in. But he's already crying about squad depth. And if he has to sell 2 to afford 1, yes, it might improve his 11, but it'll mean he has less squad depth. Ourselves and City not doing anything is not a surprise, especially given the news we got on Friday that Jurgen is going to leave. So it makes sense not to spend any money for a manager who's leaving in 6 months. And obviously we're top of the league as well. So, we're in a position of strength. Maybe you don't want to upset the apple cart. But I did think somebody would spend some money. I did think somebody would do something a little bit wild. So I'm a little bit disappointed in that regard.
In the lack of general Premier League spending?
Yeah, I just thought there'd be somebody that'd do something either really interesting or really funny.
There's still time. We know what the last 4 hours of the window can do to people. Looks like Fulham are going to get Amanda Broja now on loan on a really low loan fee by the looks of things, what I'm seeing here, which is, again, probably in the sensible category. Not really sure what Chelsea... Not going to say plan, because I'm not really sure that comes into the equation with Chelsea at the minute, does it? But I don't really know what Chelsea are thinking is the benefit to themselves for that is probably the right answer. Like Nicholas Jackson, obviously not quite back yet. And Nkunku being fit and fine is really good. And if they can somehow pair him with Cole Palmer centrally, and then you've got Gallagher who's still there and thereabouts as well, by the looks of it, staying. That probably does box off the attacking 8 or 9 or 10 sorts of positions for them without Broja needing to be there. But it doesn't improve them from where they are right now, and it certainly doesn't get them in any significant funds, obviously. They were talking about a £50 million fee to sell him, which I think is absolutely wild, to be honest. I quite like Armando Broja, but he's never in a million years shown himself to be a £50 million quid striker.
I think you could buy him twice and have change from 50 million.
It is an odd window, but there are benefits to that, I think, in having a, let's say, more sensible batch of purchases or batch of additions, that sort of thing. Like last night when we were playing, I didn't even notice until this morning, obviously, Nottingham Forest got Gio Reyna in on loan. That's really interesting. That is a short-term deal, but very interesting in what it is and how they use him. So there are things I think we can take as positives, and maybe, for the long-term health of the league or whatever, maybe not everybody's spending might turn out to be one.
Yeah, they get him in on loan, but I think there might be an option to buy in that deal. They've got Rodrigo Ribeiro in, another young kind of attacking wide player, can play through the middle from Sporting on a loan with an option to buy. So those are two interesting deals, and they're two deals with limited risk, because if you go down or if you just decide you don't want to keep the players, you can let them go back. If it works out, you could potentially get two exceptional young players on discount deals. So that type of thing is clever from Forest. And another clever move was letting Serge Aurier leave. So he's away. I think Joe Worrell looks like he's on the way out. It looks like Mangala is going as well, which I'm a little bit surprised by. But if it's 30 million is the fee.
An FFP sale, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think Scott McKenna's gone to FC Copenhagen, so he'll get to play in the Champions League after Christmas, which is, or after the Champions League comes back, which is a nice change from a relegation scrap for him. The Brohia one, 50 million. Jesus wept. The only thing I would say to Chelsea, though, is, yes, Nkunku is outstanding, but he's also missed pretty much the whole season. I wouldn't rely on his fitness to be rock solid for the remainder of the year because, having been out for so long, there's a high probability of another type of injury, maybe a muscular injury. I know he's already had one of them, but maybe he picks up another one. So you might be back to the same situation you were in with just Cole Palmer and Raheem Sterling. And this time you won't have Broja to throw in and get minutes. I'm not sure where the goals will come from. They're going to be heavily reliant on Nkunku and on Sterling to recapture his form. I know Cole Palmer has scored quite a few goals in the last few months, but a lot of them have been penalties and against relegation-threatened teams. He offered absolutely nothing last night, as he hasn't in most of the games against the top clubs. From open play, he offers very little at the moment. In terms of a goal threat, he can obviously offer in terms of build-up, but in terms of goal threat, he doesn't really offer one against the top clubs. So, it's going to be a slog for them the rest of the season. But they're a mid-table team, and we shouldn't concern ourselves with mid-table teams, Karl. We do have to concern ourselves with Arsenal Football Club. We play them at the weekend. They sit third in the league. They, in my opinion, have taken a significant step back from where they were this time 12 months ago. They're about 13 points, 12 points worse off than they were at this stage. They're not in particularly great form.
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
They're not performing at the level you would have expected when they spent 200 million in the summer. Since a very fortunate win away to Luton, they've lost away to Villa, beaten Brighton in what was a very one-sided game that could easily have gotten away from them. They drew at Anfield, where apparently they won the league. They lost at home to West Ham. They lost away to Fulham. They did hammer Palace. But it is worth noting that 2 of the goals are from set pieces, and the other 3 came on counter-attacks when Palace were throwing bodies forward. They didn't really open Palace up when Palace had a set defence, which is concerning. And then at the weekend, they beat Nottingham Forest 2-1 and probably should have won by a couple more goals. But they also went out of the FA Cup to us, a game in which they dominated for a large portion before a Jakub Kivor own goal and then a late Luis Diaz goal gave us the win. But what was concerning for them, I think, coming out of that game is if you look at the teams that lined up on the day, they were, pretty close to what they would look at as full strength. Not Ramsdale necessarily, but Saliba and Gabriel both playing. Kiwior and White. Kiwior's not a full first choice player, but White is. So it's 3/4 of your first choice defence. You've got pretty much your first choice midfield. Maybe not Jorginho, but certainly Rice and Odegaard. And then you've got Saka, you've got Martinelli. I mean, that's much closer to the starting 11 than what we had out. We started Connor Bradley there. Did we start Connor Bradley?
No,
I think
he came off the bench.
He came off the bench. Him and Bobby Clark came on. We started Trent. Gomez played left back. We started Jarrell Quansah and Ibu with no Virgil. We had no Szoboszlai in midfield. We had no Salah. So we're missing key players throughout the lines. And we still went there, withstood what they had to throw at us without ever really looking like we might concede a goal. And then we went and scored 2 late goals and won the game. I think that should be worrying for Arsenal. They've lost 4 games of the last, what's that, 7? 4 of the last 8 games they've lost. That's not great. Not great at all.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking. I didn't see the win over Crystal Palace. I did see the Forest game. Obviously, saw our game. I think that despite having quite a bit of the ball and quite a lot of shots, they weren't really dangerous chances for the most part in either match. I didn't think. Like they had like 1 or 2 big chances against us. Like I think there was the Saka one. Obviously, was one of their main ones. And they had lots of shots, but I just didn't think that there were loads of huge chances for them. Maybe, let's say they should have scored at least 1 of theirs, or maybe 2 of them, whatever. But I still don't think that, despite the volume of attempts, despite the number of possessions that they had against us, that it was wildly conclusive. They should have scored 2 goals, 3 goals, something like that. Against Nottingham Forest, it was pretty much the same. Like a lot of shots, but nothing really particularly wildly clear cut. They had an XG total for that Nottingham Forest game of 1.17. For a dominance in terms of shots and possession, it's pretty low, to be honest. And so to score twice, better in terms of clinical edge for them, or whatever you want to call it, or fortune, or anything, but it wasn't, I didn't think, completely convincing, which is quite in contrast to not right at the start of the season, but soon after the start of the season, when they did look really, really confident. They were playing quite quickly, and a couple of those front players in particular were very, very dangerous. I think in terms of their attack, what has maybe switched a little bit is that Martinelli didn't start too well, but maybe looks a little bit better or more effective in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Martinelli is now up to 4 league goals in the season after those 2 late goals on the counter against Crystal Palace. That's not where they expected him to be this season. But their highest league scorer is Bukayo Saka with 7 league goals, which, given how much money they've spent and the fact that they do have a lot of good attacking players, I think they're going to be really disappointed by the fact that he's got 7 and nobody else has more than 4. Jesus, Odegaard, Trossard, and Martinelli have 4 each. When you compare and contrast that to ourselves and what we're getting, we have Mo on 14, Jota on 8, Darwin on 7, and then Diaz on 4. So, their top 4 attackers have a combined 19 goals in the league, and our top 4 attackers have a combined 33 goals in the league. That's a significant difference. They just don't, like you said, they don't create big chances. There's a lot of nice football, but they're shooting on half chances as opposed to trying to turn them into better chances. And a lot of it feels panicked. Whereas like last season, when they went on their run in the first half of the year, you'd see them get into decent positions, but then have that awareness to make the right decision and play the pass to the fella in the better position and create a far more high percentage chance. This season, they're not doing that. And I think part of that is that these players just haven't been in great goal scoring form, and they're trying to force things a bit more. So like Jesus, for example, he had the one big chance against Forest before they scored, and he hit the kind of the post crossbar angle. But that was sort of a panicked finish. I think Jesus last season just rolls that into the corner, because he's got a bit more composure about him. We've seen Martinelli this season get into positions down that left and try and force a shot on his weaker side from a narrow angle, whereas last year he was cutting back in field and either feeding a runner from midfield, whether it was Xhaka or Odegaard, or squaring it across for Jesus or Saka to have an easy tap in. They're just not making the right decisions in the final third this season. And they're also not helped by the fact that Martin Odegaard is having to drop so deep into midfield to try and get their attacks progressing, because Havertz, despite the fact he has put together a decent... Oh, I should have pointed out, Eddie Nketiah actually has 5 league goals, so my mistake. He has 5 league goals. But Kai Havertz, despite a run where he scored a few goals, he really hasn't added anything to their build-up play. They've lost a significant amount from what Granit Xhaka was offering in them in that role last year. Rice is also not as good in possession as Thomas Partey was last season. So in both of those areas, they've had a downgrade on the ball, which means Odegaard is having to come back and do more, which means he's not on the edge of the box with those lovely little patterns and link-ups that he had last year with Saka and Jesus.
What do you think about, and obviously there's not a direct comparison here, and I do think Arsenal are a different kind of attacking side to Liverpool. Like we're so much quicker in transition play and we're so much more focused on transition play. We're also a lot more direct with that first pass than Arsenal are. They do love a bit of possession in the channel areas without going anywhere. But what do you think about, Darwin Núñez and all the discourse that we have around him in terms of like underperformance and, not the end product that we want and all the rest of it? 7 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League this season. And Bukayo Saka being Arsenal's top forward in those regards with 7 goals and 7 assists, but from 550 minutes more than Darwin has played.
I think it's funny. I really do think it's funny because Bukayo Saka is getting put in conversations with Mohamed Salah. And yet Darwin Núñez is matching him stride for stride. And people will say, oh, but Darwin plays through the middle, but he doesn't always. In fact, quite a chunk of his minutes have come playing from the left, and he doesn't take any set pieces. So Saka's got a couple of penalty goals in there. Well, Darwin did miss a penalty last night.
He should have a penalty.
He should have a penalty goal. But Saka has taken penalties this season. Saka also takes corners, which is where some of his assists come from. I think Saka's a wonderful player, but I don't think he impacts the game as much as Darwin does. There are games where Bukayo Saka is completely anonymous. There's never a game where Darwin is anonymous, ever. Last night, Darwin didn't score. He was the most impactful of our front three throughout the game. I know Jota played brilliantly, but Darwin made a bigger impact overall throughout the game. But if Bukayo Saka doesn't score or assist, you're often wondering where he is. That Cole Palmer performance last night, we've seen that performance from Bukayo Saka a couple of times this year. I think he's a wonderful player. I think, unfortunately for him, he plays for a club where the fan base at this point are so desperate for real success, a Premier League or a Champions League, that they're just incredibly prone to massively overrate their own players. Now, all clubs overrate their own players. All fan bases overrate their own players. But very few do it to the level of Arsenal. And they put Saka in conversations with Mohamed Salah. They put William Saliba in conversations with Virgil van Dijk. And they're conversations that those young players have no business being in. And it does them no favours. Saliba for the Nottingham Forest goal the other day. That is horrendous defending. Absolutely horrendous defending. But it would be fine if he was just a young defender who was developing and being allowed to develop. When you're talking about him as if he's the best defender in the world, he's just going to get ridiculed for something like that. Because if you're the best defender in the world, you should be the finished product. So he's not given the leeway. And it's the same for Saka. Young players will always have bad games. Young players will always have anonymous games. Except Conor Bradley, obviously. But when Saka has a bad game, it's highlighted a lot because he's Bukayo Saka. He's meant to be as good as Mohamed Salah. When it should just be kind of, look, it's a bad game. He's not having a great season. He was incredible last year. He's definitely 25% less this year. But that's normal for a young player. But because of how he gets hyped up by imbeciles, he's not able to have those bad games without getting criticism. The reason Darwin gets so much criticism, though, is because Liverpool bad. Liverpool bad sells newspapers, gets clicks on websites, and gets likes and retweets on Twitter. That's the thing. But if you remember last year, we were all being told that Gabriel Jesus was the signing of the summer. What a player. Can't do better than this fella. It's not all about the goals with him. And yet, since the two players were signed, Darwin has significantly outperformed Gabriel Jesus in similar enough minutes totals, because Darwin isn't an every game starter or hasn't always been an every game starter for us. I think he's made himself one now. But look, Liverpool bad will always trump everything for some people.
I think quite an important part there is similar to what you've just said, but slightly different, that Darwin has made himself a starter for now rather than now. And Arsenal really have no alternative other than to continue starting Jesus and to continue starting Saka whenever they're fit and available. Like, Nketiah's done quite well for them, but he's never in a million years a forward who's going to be leading the line all season long and you win the title. He's just not at that level. That's just
he's a good poacher off the bench, or he's a good mid-table.
I think he's a really good second centre forward for them to have, like centre forward starter. Like Liverpool didn't have that for a long, long time. You think about the Torres years and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he'd have been perfect behind a Torres.
Yeah, we never had someone of the level of Nketiah who wasn't starting for us. That's where we were for a long time. Where we now have five forwards who, in fact, Gakpo's been crap this year. Let's not fucking sugarcoat it, right? He's been awful. But in general terms, he should be of the ability which is round about the starting level of some of those other players. And if he gets into a good run of form, that's more or less where he will be. If Eddie Nketiah is in a really good run of form, he can just about be similar level to, let's say, Martinelli. But it's over a much, much shorter period of time. And therefore, they always obviously have to then go back to Saka, they go back to Jesus, and Martinelli starts pretty much all the time as well. If this game becomes a straight shootout, Liverpool win every single time, pretty much, unless Darwin takes all the shots and he hits the bar every single time, obviously. That's a different matter.
Don't rule it out. Don't rule it out.
It could absolutely and definitely happen. Not ruling it out in the slightest. But you look across the Premier League season that both these squads have had, obviously you can just do it very, very quickly and easily and say, look at the league table, we've played the same number of games, Liverpool has scored more goals, therefore the attack's better. But ignore the fact that we've scored more goals and got more points. The number of chances that we've made and the quality of chances we've made is like off the charts compared to Arsenal. Like, we miss a lot of chances. That's a Liverpool thing. And especially when we have some of the forwards that we do, and we just live with that. But we score loads and we create even more. Like goals and assists, expected goals plus expected assists per 90 this season. Arsenal have four players who are above 0.5 per 90, and so do Liverpool. But our four are Gakpo 0.53, Jota 0.57, Nunez 0.96, and Salah 1.04. So he's expected a goal or assist every single game and a bit. He's just way, way, way above everybody else. Arsenal's are Odegaard 0.5 exactly, Jesus 0.61, Trossard 0.65, Saka 0.7. So we have two players who all season long so far have been consistently better output than any of Arsenal's squad are managed to put even close to, like considerably better. The difference between 0.7 and 0.9, 0.95, even over 1 across 20 games is like a lot of chances there, a lot of potential for goal scoring. So if it does become just a straight end-to-end kind of game, I think Liverpool win out more often than not, to be honest. But where Arsenal will try and beat us here is I think a very, very similar to approach to the FA Cup game, but obviously with from their perspective, they want more clinical finishing. I think if they try and control the game really, really well, if they have the energy and fight to match us that Chelsea, for example, did not even come close to trying to have, then we can make it a really good game. But they will try and keep us away from that ball as much as possible because they do have the technical capacity to pass around us, and they do have the patterns in their play and the players who know those patterns to navigate the press, to play into the spaces behind that midfield, and then to get the threats on goal.
They do, but I would say if you're giving me a choice between Enzo, Caicedo, and Rice to play through a press, Rice is the third one you're picking. He's more often than not going to turn around and knock it back to a centre-back or play it out to a full-back. And he's not going to take on that responsibility. And he's going to put some of his teammates into pressure situations. They came to Anfield, they had a good 15 minutes, and then we ran them off the pitch. And we should have won that game. Like, they got a draw because an incompetent referee missed a Stonewall penalty and because Trent missed an absolutely glorious chance. Like, that's why they got out of there with a draw. We should have won that game quite comfortably. And it wasn't like a thing where it was a half chance or a semi-decent chance. That is a golden opportunity that Trent missed. And the penalty was Stonewall. They can't make those claims about that FA Cup game where we went with a rotated 11 and didn't really seem like we were all that up for it. It almost seemed like we were there just to sort of get through it. Hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own two-footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m, Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin DeVries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye. And go out. And then when it got to late in the game, we were like, oh, we can actually win this. And then we scored. Obviously, there's a bit of fortune in the goal. But like, at no point have I felt like Arsenal are a better team than us. Even last season, Karl, when they had that great first 19 games and took 51 points, that's the only 19-game spell that they've been better than us under Arteta or beforehand since Jurgen took over. Well, since Jurgen took over and got his team in the door. Like, we have been better than them now for a year, for a full 38-game season. In fact, I think it's 42 or 43 games now. We have been a better team than them. So, like, a lot of their fan base seem to have this idea that they're better than us because they finished above us last year. But they finished above us last year because we were so poor through the first half of the year. Once we actually copped ourselves on, we were the better team than them over the back end of the season. We've been better than them this season. To go back to the attack, we've played 3 games more than them this season. We've played 35. They've played 32. They've scored 63 goals. We've scored 88. We've scored 25 goals more than them in our 3 extra games. We've conceded 2 goals more than them. But we've played a lot of games in the Europa League with, like, kids in defence, like Scanlon and Chambers and Bradley and Kwanzaa. That's why we've conceded the few more goals. But I would happily concede 2 more goals to score 25 more. And when you look at just pure goal scoring numbers, all competitions across the season, Bukayo Saka, 10. Gabriel Jesus, 8. Odegaard, 7. Trossard, 7. Martinelli, 6. Nketiah, 6. Havertz, 5. And then you've got Rice and Gabriel with 3. And you just look at ours. Salah, 18. Jota, 13. Darwin, 11. So 3 of ours have scored more than any of theirs. Gakpo has 9. As you said, he's been dreadful this year. But yet he still scored more than their second highest goal scorer. Luis Diaz has been largely dreadful this season. He's got the same number as their second highest goal scorer. Then we've got Dominic on 5, Curtis on 5, Gravenberch on 3, Endo on 2, Virgil on 2, Trent on 1. We have a lot more goals in our squad, not just in our team, in our squad than they have. We have more avenues to score goals, more ways to score goals. Like, they're so heavily reliant on set pieces. I think it's down to like 46% or 45% of their goals now for the season have been set pieces. But at one point it was half. When Gabriel scored his second goal against Crystal Palace, I think it actually edged ever so slightly over 50% of their goals. And now they've scored 5 that weren't set pieces. But 3 of them were counterattacks. And 2 of them were the worst efforts at defending that you'll ever see from Nottingham Forest. Like that first goal, the defending is utterly abysmal. They have multiple opportunities to make a challenge, to close the ball down, and they don't do it. And the second one, they just gift it to Arsenal. Gift it to them on the halfway line. And Forest have 2 back against an Arsenal break of 3. And one of those is Morgan Gibbs-White, who is an attack-minded player who's just been caught in that position. Like they don't have avenues to goals the way we have. And if this becomes a shootout, we will win. But if this becomes a kind of grinded out game, I think we'll win it as well, because we've got a better defence than they do. Man for man, system for system, our defence is better than theirs, goalkeeper included. And in midfield, if it becomes a battle of will, I mean, who are you putting your money on? Dominic, Alexis and Curtis, or Odegaard, Rice and Kai Havertz, or Jorginho, or Trossard? Like, I don't see any area in which they're better than us. They are very, very good at keeping the ball, and they can play some lovely football. But they came to Anfield and tried that, and with Turo Endo, blew it up repeatedly. Curtis Jones monstered them in midfield. So I don't really see what we should be hugely concerned about. They're a good team without question, but they're not as good as us, and they haven't been for the last 43 games.
Yeah, to be honest, even last season when we were like rubbish, like Liverpool were no longer part of the equation as soon as we were as bad as we were. But at no point did I think that Arsenal were as good as we were previously, or as good as Man City were. And even when Arsenal were top, 5 points clear or whatever it was, neither of us at any point said that Arsenal would win the league.
No.
I was pretty vocal, to be perfectly honest, written and on the pods, and certainly with my Arsenal supporting partner here, that they would not win the league. And they, in fact, wouldn't be within 6 points of winning the league when City won the title, which was the case in the end. This team is really, really good, but they do lack bits, I think. And a lot of that is mentality. I think they lack a genuinely elite player at the back, whether that's a centre-back or a goalkeeper. I think that the goalkeepers are distinctly second tier, and I think that you don't win the Premier League. And to be honest, even if we have someone sent off after 5 minutes and they absolutely get up for it and the crowd are behind them and they win 4-0, I still think Liverpool finish above them this season.
Oh, yeah. Karl, I genuinely believe there is a much higher chance of Arsenal finishing 5th than there is of them winning the league. A much, much higher chance. And I said to you before the season, we did that hot takes pod for each club, and I said to you mine was that Arsenal finish 5th, and I still think it's in play. Spurs are 3 points behind them. Spurs have been ravaged by injuries. Villa are poor away from home. They're still only 3 points behind them. If Villa hit a run of form, Villa are in a bad run at the moment, but if Villa find form, and Spurs find form, I think there's more chance they finish fifth than anything else. Like, I said this to you before, they've been blessed with injury luck this year. Jesus is the only starter who's missed 4 or more games. I know they'll point to Thomas Partey. I'm sorry, you signed Declan Rice to replace Thomas Partey, and then you told us all he was the best defensive midfielder in the world. So you can't be missing Thomas Partey if you've got the best defensive midfielder in the world. They'll point to Jurrien Timber, and that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But he didn't play all season, so I don't think you can class him. Like, we don't class missing Thiago all season. Thiago hasn't kicked a ball all year. None of us are turning around saying, well, we haven't had Thiago all year. We just get on with it. And like, Jurrien Timber plays in a position where, well, I don't really know which position he was bought to play. If it was left back, okay, you've got a 35 million left back that you signed last summer and spent all of last season telling us he was the best left back in the league. If he's the right back, then it's even more confusing because you signed Ben White for 50 million to replace Saliba, who your manager didn't want, realised Ben White wasn't good enough at centre-back, shunted him to right-back. He's a £50 million player. So if you're telling me, will Timber be the right-back, I'm not crying for you when you've got a 50 million replacement and you've got Tomiyasu, who's very good and costs another 20-odd million. Like, so that's not bad injury luck. Bad injury luck is when all your centre-backs get injured and you don't have anyone left, or when both left-backs get injured and you have to take a right-back / centre-back and shift him across. That's bad injury luck. Losing a player that you've already replaced in your starting 11, or losing a player where you already have good depth, that's calm. I'm not crying a tear for you. Saliba's played every game. White's played almost all. Gabriella's played almost all. Odegaard's played the majority. Gabriel Martinelli's played the majority. Saka's played the majority. Like, who have you been missing all season? The only game Kai Havertz missed was when he was suspended. Rice has played every game, I think. Saka's played every... Like, you haven't had injury issues. You just haven't. But at some point you might. And if they do get 2 injuries to key players, like Spurs lost Van de Ven and Maddison for 3 months. They lost Romero for a big chunk of that with a suspension. They lost Basuma with a suspension. Now Basuma and Sarah are off at AFCON. And yet they've just continued to get on with it. And they're only 3 points behind them. I think Arsenal need to be looking over their shoulders, not ahead of them. They don't have a good goalkeeper. They've got one really promising centre-back who's awful in the air, like genuinely awful. He's winning 38% of his aerials this season. The other centre-back, I think, is good. I think as a defender, he's better than Saliba, but he's rash and he makes mistakes. Both fullbacks are flaky. Rice has significant flaws from a positional standpoint. He makes up for a lot of them with his physicality and his athleticism. But defensively, he's not Thomas Partey. He's not Rodri. He's not Fabinho. He's not Casemiro level from a defensive point of view. He's a great athlete. He's covers a shit ton of ground, but he's got similar flaws to what Henderson had when he played there for us when he was in his prime. Positionally, lack of awareness, things like that. There's holes in that defence I don't see, even with their defensive record this season. Like, much of that is down to how strong they are in terms of keeping the ball. They don't give up a lot of chances because they have the ball the majority of the time. It's like when Pep was at Barcelona. Like, neither you or I are fans of Victor Valdez. And yet Victor Valdez has a whole bunch of personal accolades for Barca having great defensive records with him in goal, and with Dani Alves, who couldn't defend to save his life at right back, and with Gerard Piqué, who was great on the ball but flawed defensively. But they would concede the least goals in the league season after season because they had so much of the ball. That's the whole Arteta method, is nicked from Pep. But there's flaws defensively, there's flaws in midfield in terms of how they progress the ball, and there's flaws up front in that they don't have someone that you can just look at and go, he's getting me 25 goals a season. They just don't have that player. Now, maybe it'll be Martinelli in a year or two, but that's a year or two from now. How much more money are they going to pump into Arteta to get him to the point where Martinelli's ready, Saka's ready, Saliba's ready to really lead a title charge? We said it all last season. The title race begins when there's 10 games to go. Arsenal fans were celebrating winning the league in December and January and February. It came to the last 10 games of the season, and what happened? The same thing that happened the year before when there was real pressure. They bottled it and they fell apart, and City just walked past them as if they hadn't been there.
I think the one thing that you just mentioned there, like about when some of these players are ready to step up and score the number of goals that they want them to, it's kind of linked, but it's also not going to be a quick turnaround for that. And you mentioned that so many of their goals have set piece origins, which is completely right for this season in the Premier League again. And just had a quick look at the Anfield match between the two teams. Their XG from open play chances was under 0.5.
Do you know? Like, that minuscule. And it's not like we had all the ball.
No.
I'd imagine the possession was fairly similar, but they just didn't create anything from open play. And that's been a big issue for them this season, is they're not creating. And look, set pieces are a very, very valuable commodity. And we have not relied on them. We've added them to our game under Jurgen Klopp and been a great proponent of scoring from set pieces and what a weapon it can be. And that's fine. I'm not criticizing them for being good at set pieces.
Yep.
What I'm doing is I'm using that to point out the fact that they don't create a lot from open play.
Yeah, there's other aspects of that game which is still missing. Actually, just had a look at the FA Cup one as well, for the FA Cup at home, where they did have a lot of chances, but like I say, not real good, clear chances. Their XG for open play from that game, in the FA Cup game, was again under 1.0. So, at
I'd
home
love
you have
to
as
see
much possession as you do.
I'd love to see how many goals and what their XG is when you take out set pieces and counterattacks. I reckon they're under 15 goals for the season in the Premier League.
Open play goals is 18. They've got 14 set pieces and 6 penalties, so 20 from set plays as such, and 5 counter-attacking goals, 1 own goal, and 18 from open play.
So 5 counter-attacking goals, that counts within the... How many did you say they scored from open play? 18?
18.
So they've scored 13 goals where it hasn't been counter-attack or set play. 13 league goals where it hasn't been a counter-attack or a corner, free kick or penalty or an own goal.
So 24 in total. I'm not sure. No, that doesn't count. They're separate. Counter-attack and open play are both separate. They've just tallied them
okay.
up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they've scored
18 general open play goals, let's say, and then 5 counter-attacking open play goals, if you want to talk about it that way.
18 in 22 games.
Yeah.
Do you have our numbers by any chance?
I will do if you give me a sec.
Because I'd imagine it's considerably more. I know we are also a proponent of the counter-attack, but...
We also have 5 counter-attacking goals, so the same there. We have 4 penalties to, what did I say for them? 6?
6.
We've had 3 own goals go our way compared to their 1. We've scored 5 set-piece goals compared to whatever I said for theirs, 14 or something like that.
Yeah.
We have 34 open play goals.
Yeah, so there you go. So double, almost double from open play. Not getting the same help with penalties. You did say we have 3 own goals. Now, they technically had 2, but one of them got ruled as a Gabriel set-piece goal, but still. So 18 open play goals against 34 for us. I mean, there's no comparison. There's just no comparison.
And again, we're speaking here not in terms of who should win the game, but this is in comparison to the season as a whole, where the teams are. This is what the teams are almost.
Yeah. We as an attacking force are significantly better than them. Defensively, we defend with basically two in Virgil and Ibu and commit pretty much everybody else to going forward.
I think both teams have kept the same number of clean sheets in the league as well, 8 each.
Yeah. But they played 3 and sometimes 4 centre-backs. And Declan Rice sat in front of them, who's the greatest defensive midfielder to ever live, if you didn't know. We play basically a midfielder at right back, in Robbo, a very attack-minded left back. Kurt, now, Joe is a centre-back by trade, but, you know, they're more defensive-minded than we are. And yet we have conceded less goals than them in the league. And we play a very open style. It's ridiculous that we have only conceded. Where are we for goals conceded this year?
In terms of the whole league?
In terms of the league, we've conceded 19 in 22 games.
Record.
Yeah, the best defensive record in the league. 19 goals conceded. Considering how open we play, that's actually ridiculous and proof, if anyone needed it, that Alisson, Ibu and Virgil are incredible. Especially Alisson and Virgil, because Ibu's obviously been in and out this year with injuries and rotation and whatever else. But Ali and Virgil are just on a completely different level to anything they have to offer defensively. Like, if we're being honest, and you're picking a combined 11, and I know they're silly, but if you're picking a combined 11, other than Saka, who would play left wing, would anyone get in?
From Arsenal's team?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think they would. Like, I know people were very, very happy to try and say, we should have signed Declan Rice. You put Declan Rice in the Liverpool team. I don't think he gets in the Liverpool team. He's been really poor since that game at Anfield.
I mean, if you're muddling up the actual spots that they play, then you'd probably take Odegaard over Curtis Jones, even though I'd kill you for doing so. But probably would. It would be. I mean, let's say generally speaking, most people probably would.
Yeah. Yeah, most people probably would. And Odegaard is a very, very good player. Like, I'm not knocking him. I think he's tremendous. I love watching the lad play. But midfields are not about individuals. Midfields are about partnerships and units. And we saw it last night. Enzo and Caicedo individually are better players than Alexis and Curtis. But Alexis and Curtis with Dominic as a unit works brilliantly. Enzo and Caicedo don't work at all. Enzo, Caicedo and Gallagher doesn't work at all. Our unit is stronger, and our unit in midfield is stronger than that Arsenal unit. I'm taking Dominic over Odegaard. I'm taking Alexis over Rice because he's smarter and he's much better on the ball. And I'm taking Curtis Jones over Havertz. I'm taking him over Jorginho, whoever they want. I'm taking him over them. And even if you were to say, oh, well, like the best three would be Dom, Rice and Alexis, let's say. Or Dom, Rice and whatever. Alexis is in. I think Dom is in. You might say, well, you take Rice and then the two Liverpool lads can be the eights. Curtis Jones has been better than Declan Rice for the last 2.5 months since he came back into the team. Curtis Jones has been better than Declan Rice. He was also better than Declan Rice at the end of last season. Rice had a really good start to life at Arsenal. A really good start. Because it was new, Arsenal were flying, they were winning games, and even though he did have a couple of poor performances in there, the team was winning, so they got overlooked. But you look at their games, like he was dreadful in that game against Chelsea. It was absolutely horrendous. He was terrible against Spurs. He was poor up at Newcastle. He was dreadful against Luton. He was poor against Villa. He was poor at Anfield. Well, he was okay at Anfield against us, but I thought Endo outplayed him. He was awful against West Ham. He was awful against Fulham. He wasn't good against Palace, and loads of Arsenal fans after that game were very, very critical of him. And the Forest game, he played okay, but it wasn't like a standout performance. you're going back to the start of December against Wolves, but he was brilliant against Wolves. He was absolutely, and he was really good against Brighton as well, to be fair to him. But that's 2 games since the beginning of December. Curtis Jones has been turning in 8 and 9 out of 10s since coming back into the Liverpool team after injuries and a couple of other bits. I'm not taking Declan Rice over Curtis Jones if it's a straight up, meld the midfield together. I think Curtis complements Alexis and Dominic more than Declan Rice would.
Luckily, we get to have all of them.
Yeah, we're very, very fortunate with this midfield. And I still think there's one more piece to be added to it. And then we've got all these exciting young players as well. Like you've got your Bobby Clarks, you've got Stefan Bisekic when he's fitting back. Trey Nioni looks like he might be the greatest midfielder ever made. And like we've got Ryan Gravenberch, who has clearly got bags of talent. And if he gets everything figured out, could be a hell of a player for us. So I'd much rather have our midfield group than their midfield group. You'd much rather have our attack. You'd rather have our defence. You'd much rather have our goalkeeper. So what do they have that we would apparently be jealous of? We certainly wouldn't want their manager over ours.
No, I was going to say, I mean, if they are as far below our level as we're saying, and I do believe that that's the case, maybe it is the manager that's better than us.
Yeah, but but I look at the league table, right? And first of all, they had an easier run of fixtures through the first 19 than we did in terms of when they played teams back to back and where they played teams. Like we went away to Chelsea, away to Newcastle. We went away to Spurs, away to Brighton, away to City.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
We had United and Arsenal at home, and we had Villa at home. But you look at them, they had United at home, they had Spurs at home, they had City at home. They did go away to Arsenal, or away to Chelsea. They went away to Newcastle, but they got Wolves at home as well. And I don't think people realise how good Wolves are at home this year. We had them away. They've been home to Brighton. Yeah, they've been away to us and they've been away to Villa. But I think when you look at the fixtures, the way they broke down in terms of back-to-back games, the mix with Europe and us having to travel to wherever and then come back and play an away game in a 12:30 spot, or international break, we come back and play that 12:30 Saturday spot. They didn't have any of that. They had an easier run than us. And yet we're still top. We've had significantly more injuries than them, and we're still top. And like, we also put in a completely new midfield this year. They didn't have to do that. They added Rice, but they already had, I suppose they did in a way because they added Havertz as well. So yeah, fair enough. But I don't know. I feel like we're a significantly better team than them. And I'd be surprised if they're within 8 points of us come the end of the season. I mean, we're 5 points clear, Karl, and I only feel like we're getting going now. I only think it's in the last 3 to 4 weeks that we've really found a groove. Before that, it was a lot of bitty performances where we weren't playing well, but we were winning. Now we're playing really, really well. We said this before the home game. They were playing as well as they possibly could, and they were scraping wins. We were playing badly, and we were getting wins. We said at the time, what happens when Liverpool start to play well? Well, now you're seeing it.
And I wonder what that is going to be for them and what that'll mean for them, because, Arteta and a couple of the others have spoken about the break that they had came at a good time for them, and they feel, a bit more energized and all the rest of it. So, fine. They've won their single game that they've had since that, and they won the game before it as well. That was the Palace and the Forest games. But even with those 2 wins, Arsenal have won 3 out of their last 9.
And who were those wins against?
Well, those 2 teams plus Brighton.
So a Brighton team massively out of form, ravaged by injuries, a Palace team trending in the wrong way, and a Nottingham Forest team who are a relegation contender. In our last 3 league matches, we've demolished Newcastle. Now, admittedly, a Newcastle team out of form. We've demolished Bournemouth, who were, along with us, the most informed team in the league at the time, away from home. Arsenal's 3 wins, by the way, also all at home. And then we demolished Chelsea last night. And the Newcastle game and the Chelsea game are the 2 most one-sided games I've seen all year from any team. We could and should have scored 7 or 8 in both games.
Darwin should have scored 7 last night.
Do you know what I mean? This is the thing. And there's going to come a game where he does absolutely wall up somebody. And Arsenal
I would be
are
very
set up
not
for it to be them.
I would be not surprised if Darwin didn't score a hat-trick at any point in the season, but did get 5 in one game.
Yeah, absolutely. He gets that many chances. So in terms of Liverpool, Karl, I think most of the team picks itself. Ali in goal, Ibu and Virgil, Joe Gomez left back, Dominic, Alexis and Curtis in midfield, Diaz, Darwin and Jota up front. I think that they all have to start.
Yeah.
Which means the only question is,
stupid.
Are you starting the best right back in the world or the second best right back in the world? And I'm not telling you which is which.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, last time we had this conversation, it was the Scouse Cafu, wasn't it, that we were trying to convince ourselves was... unless there is a physical issue with Alexis with that knee clash that he had at the end of the game, and I know he carried on playing, that's fine, but it's afterwards where you get bruising and swelling and you don't have the mobility in your leg. That's the potential issue for him there. So
and he has had a couple of knocks to the knee already this year, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly the same one. I think last time that he was out for there was a cut on it as well, I think at the time. So hopefully there's nothing there, because as I said on Raw, that was the most complete performance that he's put in and the best that he's played that role for us. So hopefully he's absolutely fine. If he's not, I think it becomes quite easy to put Trent straight into there and you leave Bradley at right back. Assuming Alexis plays, I think Trent comes back in for this one all the same.
Yeah, so do I. And I do also think that's the right decision. I said it last night on Raw. Look, development isn't linear. Young players will have bad games. Just because Conor Bradley has come in and done brilliantly in this sort of 4 to 5 games he's had recently, doesn't mean that he's not going to have 3 or 4 stinkers in a row, because that's what happens with young players. The 2 in our team that came through the academy, Trent came in and everything was pretty much smooth sailing. Trent never really had a hiccup until last season, which was year 5 or 6 as a starter. Curtis Jones came in, arguably more highly regarded from his time in the academy than Trent had been when in the academy. And yet it's taken Curtis 4 or 5 years to really win over everybody and convince everybody, not the staff for that, but convince the fan base that he's good enough to establish himself as a starter. Connor Bradley could go either way. Like, Nico Williams came into the team a few years ago and looked brilliant for his first couple of appearances. And then he looked poor. And then people got on his back. And that, I think, had a big effect on his development, because I think it knocked his confidence. I don't want to see Connor Bradley's confidence knocked. We don't produce many from this island. And even though he plays for the Northern Brethren, he's still from the island. So he will have full support. But I want to see him developed at the right pace and not rushed. I have no doubts if he plays, he'll give 100%. I think Trent is the correct choice for this one.
I do as well. And I think sometimes when we speak about, like, let's say some of the forwards where they've played well and we sort of talk about them and say, I think he should stay in because, it's good for the confidence as much as anything else. You want to show them that you can win a place in the team and so on. It's very, very different when you're talking about a kid with fewer than 15 appearances versus the vice captain of the team. It is a different situation. There's also, like, if we're being brutally honest, whose confidence do you care about more? Trent's, obviously, because he's more likely to play in more games and is more proven that he can win more games for us. And just to add another thing into the equation, this will be Trent's first game back in like a month. There's a good chance he can't play the full 90, and we need someone to come on, especially if they, like, later on in game, either don't start Martinelli and he comes on with pace, then you might need someone who's really fresh to come on, or even if they do take Martinelli off and bring on someone like Trossard, or we just mentioned him before, in that he's, one of Arsenal's more consistent players on a permanency basis, even if not game to game, at chance creation and all the rest of it. So there's a very good chance that our substitutes, regardless of who they are going to have to play a big part in this game, because we have still got a few players coming back. Dom obviously only started his first game back. Robertson will probably get another sub appearance to continue his own comeback and so on. So Bradley, if he's on the bench, I'm sure that he will get some part of the game at some point, even if Liverpool are trailing and we want to go more attacking. One of the changes that we have been making, obviously, is putting Trent into midfield. So again, you're looking at him to go across.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, there is the option for Jurgen if he wanted to make a little change and play 4 in midfield and maybe drop out one of the forward players, likely Luis Diaz. He could play Trent on the right side of a midfield 4, Dominic on the left, Alexis and Curtis in the middle, and play Bradley at right back. And then you'd have Bradley and Trent down that side. So Trent could play narrow and Bradley could overlap. You could do that either. I don't think he will. I don't expect him to do that. But maybe in-game, it's an option for him. So yeah, I think Trent is the pick. So now, prediction.
I am going to say eventually the game descends into a shootout. So I'm going to go 3-2 to us. I don't think it'll be like that right from the start, but sooner or later, I think that this one might just have to make itself a little bit crazy.
I can see us scoring early and them having to open up a bit more and not be as conservative as they are. I think that is going to be blood in the water for Darwin and Jota. I'm going to go 3-1 to us. We went there last year and lost 3-2, and we're on the wrong side of 3 egregious refereeing decisions, which if they'd been called the right way, we would have won 3-1. And we were terrible, genuinely terrible. Terrible going into the game, terrible on the day, terrible coming out of the game. Awful. And we still should have won that game 3-1. Saka was offside for the first goal. Diogo Jota had a stonewall penalty turned down. What was the third one? Oh, the dive by Jesus on when Thiago put his foot up and Jesus threw himself to the floor like he'd been shot. That penalty shouldn't have been given. The first goal shouldn't have been given. We were denied a penalty. We should have won that game 3-1, or at the very least 2-1. They needed referee intervention to win that game, and that was when they were flying and we were dreadful. So we're playing brilliant football at the moment. I think these players are so locked in and focused right now. I think they're going into games feeling absolutely untouchable. Last night, the difference between the two teams was staggering. You wouldn't, if you told someone to watch that game who knew football but didn't know what teams they were, and you said to somebody, oh, this is a cup game, the team in red are a Premier League team and the team in blue are a League One team, I don't think they'd have been able to tell that wasn't the case. The gulf was just enormous. I think we can go to the Emirates and outplay Arsenal. I think we can run all over them if we want to, if that's how we go and approach it. And if we approach it like we did last night, I think we can blow them away and be 2 up within 30 minutes. And then it's just about managing the game from there. And I don't think they've got the firepower to score much more than 1 if we're not opening things up on them. So 3-1 for me. Anything you want to plug before we go?
There's an Africa Cup of Nations piece coming out tomorrow morning. So that's Friday morning, ahead of the quarterfinals as we are out there.
Have you got a favourite to win it now with Senegal and Morocco gone?
Senegal gone, Morocco gone, Egypt gone,
Ghana gone.
Yeah, Ghana did particularly well to get themselves out in the group stage where almost every group participant goes through. So well done them. My favourite is Nigeria now, I think, and that's not the most imaginative one, perhaps, considering they have the history, but I think
their attack is something else, isn't it?
The attack is something else, but actually they've got this far based on the defence.
I know, and they're all individually poor defenders.
Yes, they are. But
collectively, they're working well.
Very, very good. Fewest chances created against them. Lowest XG. I think it was something like 1.4 accumulated XG across 4 games that they've conceded, which is just insanity. And I don't necessarily think that the teams left in now are of a wildly massive attacking quality level, other than Angola have been pretty good themselves at the competition. So they've basically now got the best attacking team that is left in the tournament other than themselves. And if it does become a straight shootout, I think Osimhen, Lookman and Simon, you basically back them to win that, don't you? So yeah, I think they go the distance now.
Yeah, fair.
Watch me be proven wrong in a 3-0 defeat tomorrow.
Hopefully. It's all right. I already jinxed Morocco out of the competition, so it's fine. Right, folks, we will leave it there. We'll be back next week to do this again. So take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.